A Cure for Consumption by Bernard Capes. Uncle John was very poorly, and poorly in a new way for him. Being an ex-civil servant, he was accustomed to regard his liver as a captious quantity, to be reckoned with on all occasions of festivity. But this chest trouble, with its continuous nausea and hacking cough, was something out of his experience, and frightening because of its novelty. There was consternation in the house, too, because Uncle John was a favourite, and had only recently, during the Christmas Day jollifications, proved his full claim to the title. If it had been the turkey, or the plum pudding, or the champagne punch, he would have known how to meet it with philosophy. But a perpetual cough to one of his generally sound constitution was another matter, and one that, morally, rather floored him. He stayed in bed and meditated somewhat funereally on the proverbial fatness of churchyards during green winters. There had been a good deal of rain in this, and he had shown perhaps some recklessness in his careless exposure of himself to conditions of damp and sopping feet. A man, especially of his age, had to learn not to presume upon his long immunities. He was, secretly, considerably disturbed about his condition. His married sister, with whom he was staying, pooh-poohed his fears, but he seemed conscious of something significant in the assiduity of her attentions. Saucy, his pet niece, stared at him, when she was allowed to minister, with preternaturally solemn eyes, in which was evident the instinctive estrangement of health from sickness. The old family doctor, moreover, gave him no real comfort, but was elusive about his state, in a pompous, fatherly, and entirely non-committal way. Altogether, Uncle John, disquieted and a little shocked, as all men must be over their first real encounter with the shadows, was beginning to turn his thoughts to the dismalest of contingencies. The thing, after all, always most difficult to teach the individual man, is his excessive proneness to death. It was the night sweats which finally gave some direction to the doctor's genial speculations. Uncle John did not know when or how the word consumption first sounded in his mental auricula. It seemed impossible, preposterous, that he could have developed consumption, and on such ridiculously trifling provocation. Still, assuredly there was the pain in his chest, the temperature, and above all the incessant worrying cough. He could force no appetite, and began to take on some aspect of the disease professionally imposed upon him. By the end of the fourth day, dating from the first symptoms, things were beginning to look bad. On the morning of the fifth day, his sister coming to visit him with niece Saucy Obligato, proposed with some diffidence a remedy. "You may as well try it," she said, pending the arrival of the London specialist. "These old recipes can at least do no harm, and at most may give real relief. They were the sum of much simple wisdom. If it's only effective in easing your cough a little. Phillida, if you giggle, I shall send you out of the room." "What old recipe?" asked the invalid querulously. "It's called A Good Water for Consumption," answered his sister, "and comes out of an ancient recipe book possessed by Martha Gamage. The dear old creature was up nearly all the night before last preparing it for you. Come, take it to reward her." Uncle John made a wry face. "I don't fancy these rustic medicaments. Where did she get the book from?" "Oh, it's been in her family for generations, she says." "Of course you haven't got consumption, but at least your cough can't be made worse by it. Come." Uncle John, with a melancholy resignation, sat up in his bed. His cough was really racking him. He was given 2 large dessert spoonfuls of mucilaginous fluid from a bottle, Phillida looking on curiously and expectantly all the while. "There," said the lady. "It wasn't so bad, was it?" The invalid shuddered with a decidedly queer look. "No," he whispered heroically. At that instant the mistress was called away, and Phillida, being bidden to be very careful not to upset her uncle, was left alone with the invalid. She opened upon him with a gleeful precipitancy, producing something from behind her back. "Uncle John, I've got it." "Got what?" "The book that was taken from. What Mother gave you. Shall I read it to you?" What do you mean?" "Oh, yes, all right, go ahead." And Phillida began to read hurriedly. "A good water for consumption. Take a peck of garden snails." She glanced tentatively at the patient. "Wash them in beer, put them in an oven, and let them stay till they're done crying. Then, with a knife and fork, prick the green from them, and beat the snails, shells and all, in a stone mortar. Then take a quart of green earthworms." She looked up, the wings of her little nose quivering. "There were simply millions of them in the garden that night," she said. "Slice them through the middle and strew them with salt. Then wash them and beat them, the pot being first put into the still with 2 handfuls of angelico, a quart of rosemary flowers, then the snails and worms." She broke off and hurriedly removed the basin from the wash handstand, put it on the floor, and shoved it with her foot towards the bed. Then she backed away. "There's lots more to come," she said. "Thank you," said Uncle John after an interval. "I think not. I think that does me. I'm obliged to you." He was leaning over the bowl, and uttered a sudden exclamation before sinking back upon his pillows. "6pence, by Jove," he said. The young lady gave a shriek, dropped the book, and clapped her hands. "There," she cried. "I knew you'd swallowed it in the pudding. And now all the money's accounted for."